All right, folks. Well, today I wanted to talk about this is going to be a little bit different than your usual show and tell what the hell or Terranodon news. I guess we can call this segment Terranodon Toy Talk, TTT. So, something very exciting and interesting just appeared on the internet today randomly as I was just surfing, as it were. So, I noticed on, I guess it was the Whoosh is when I first saw it, and then I started checking out He-Man.org. And along with Toy Arc, some of the websites that I frequently visit, are the new San Diego Comic Con exclusive Mattel He-Man and Prince Adam 2-pack figures. And the reason I wanted to talk about these briefly was because I found them to be quite interesting, not just aesthetically, but what Mattel has planned. Because first of all, these are released. Are they going to be released by Mattel? Um, and recently, Super 7, in the past couple of years, have taken over the license for the Masters of the Universe. So people thought that Masters of the Universe with Mattel were pretty much dead in the water. The first indication that something was going on with Mattel and Masters of the Universe is that we started seeing well the PowerCon exclusives, which I think there was a Slime He-Man and a number of other figures that I did put my pre-order on. I just can't remember. I think one was that White Ninja. So I was surprised to find out that these were Mattel figures and not Super 7, and they were classics. Now, these new figures, and I'm going to try to put some graphics up, but these new figures here are very similar to the original 5-inch scale figures, except that these have added articulation. Very interesting. So it's got like these, they're kind of like in between the Masters of the Universe classics and original Masters of the Universe figures. Very interesting. I really like how they look. Some of the box art is very reminiscent of the original mini comic art, and I'm not quite sure as to who did it. It looks like the original, the front cover of this box looks just like the old mini comics. But then you look into some of the comic panels and it's more updated artwork, but made to look like the old artwork. It's very interesting because the box has like this this old book look, and it kind of looks like this like piece of Grayskull with He-Man's armor around it, and it says by the power of Grayskull. And it comes with both the mini comic Prince Adam, which is how he looked in the original mini comics, with a soft goods blue vest, and a He-Man that looks very similar to the original He-Man, and it comes with they both come with alternate heads. There's one with longer hair made to look like the original mini comic. It oddly enough has removable hands, alternate hands, and it does not come with a official power sword. It looks to be. I don't know. It's hard to tell because I'm looking at some of the pictures here. It has a battle axe, has a little knife that you could put into his boot. It has the shield, but it only has the power sword that belongs to Adam. And so yeah, these look very interesting. They look to be maybe about 6-inch. So these pretty much look like if you were to get your 5-inch figures and add articulation to them and stretch them out a little bit, or make them stand up straight. Because the original, of course, if you've seen classic He-Man figures, they kind of got this squat pose, right? So bear with me. I'm just clicking through some of the pictures here again. Some of the notable differences between the Adam and He-Man figure is that the skin tone. He-Man looks to be a little bit more tan. Everything else is pretty much the same. Now, what I do find interesting about all of this, and we've just kind of gone over what they look like and how they're coming together, but I'm really fascinated and interested in knowing what Mattel plans to do with this after San Diego Comic-Con. Now, they've already announced that you could place a pre-order if you plan to go to Comic-Con. So they're going to only be exclusive to Comic-Con attendees. Now, they're saying if there's any left over, which I doubt, then they may be available at the Mattel store, the new Mattel store, not the old Matty Collector that was a nightmare to navigate and order from. which I fear may be the same thing if these figures become really popular. So now they may be testing the waters here. They may be looking at what sort of response this gets. I think they're making a select number of these and just trying to build hype for the overall product. Similarly to what happened back in the mid 2000s before the arrival of Masters Universe Classics. We started seeing some prototypes. We saw King Grayskull, and then we saw a prototype of a Battle Armor He-Man, I believe. And that was just like, hey, what do you guys think about this? So during last year's, I believe it was last year's PowerCon, Mattel showed some new product out. They hinted at some Thundercats maybe, and they showed some new versions of He-Man toys. They didn't show these. Now, with the rise of the He-Man styled figure, with the rise of the popularity of the He-Man style figure, I think they decided to finally take advantage of this. Not only is Super 7 producing He-Man, but you're seeing stuff coming out from Funko, specifically with the Savage World Batman and the Thundercats that they put out. So rather than following in those footsteps, and Mattel said, "Hey, look, we're the guys that started this." They decided to take that. I guess I like to refer to it as the demographic as vaguely familiar with something, where someone walks in, they're not as they haven't followed the franchise as long as people like myself who have followed Masters of the Universe for the past, well, since it started, and just kept going with it. Same thing with franchises like Star Wars. You'll get those people that casually walk into a store and say, "Hey, I recognize that. That's He-Man." So I think that's the market they're going for, because the collectors are still wanting to have their super articulated, ultra detailed Masters of the Universe classics. What I find interesting with these figures is that Mattel's going with the original look, not the Filmation look that people are more popular with I think Skeletor memes have popularized a lot of the Filmation aesthetic. So I think it's a very ballsy approach that Mattel is doing with this, if they decide that they're going to start releasing these in mass market. I'd like to see these come out at Walmart and Target, GameStop exclusives, and that's maybe what they're trying to do. But first, they're testing the grounds first, because to create these molds, to do these, create these bodies, and what's the term that they like to use? Anyway, just to create these molds themselves, it's quite an undertaking. So there has to be some sort of payoff. They have to be able to produce a large number of these for it to really matter when it comes to profiting. So they're not just going to make one mold and just have it for one specific thing. So it'd be very dumb of Mattel not to take advantage of this. The fact that Masters of the Universe all pretty much use the same tooling, that's the word I'm using, require the same amount of tooling. Like 80% of the characters use the same tooling with some minor changes. For instance, Skeletor has different hands or has different feet. Now, we're not talking about the obvious differences like the armor or the head sculpts or the accessories. All the bodies are pretty much the same. They could mass produce these same bodies without having to worry about it and cutting on costs. So what I was discussing on He-Man.org, which I've been visiting for the better part of, I'm going to say 20 years. I don't know. It's been a while. Since back in the 2000X era. I can imagine there being a $20 or $19.99 price point at most retailers if they were to be releasing these at mass retail. I noticed with some of these molds that there is boot articulation. Now, if I wanted to get a lower price point, like $14.99 or $12.99, which would be the sweet spot, that boot articulation, I could do without that. As long as I get something roughly around the same size and very similar to these original figures, there's a lot of things that they can do. Very similar to what they did with what Hasbro did with the 25th anniversary of G.I. Joe. There's a lot of possibilities. There's a lot of excitement just in my head as to what can happen with a line like this. We can see, well, I'm thinking also what Hasbro did with Power of the Force. A lot of the vehicles were re-releases, remolds of the same original mold of like an AT-AT or TIE Fighters, GI Joe did the same thing with their vehicle line when they did the 25th anniversary. So who's to say that we may? It's very possible. I'm just saying, if we had a line, imagine a line where you get the original, the original first wave of He-Man characters, and along with that, you may get a Castle Grayskull from the original mold. Would that not be amazing? So this is just pure speculation. Could we get a Castle Grayskull? Could we get a Snake Mountain, just like the original, and maybe with some added paint apps or some some extra features? Right now, Super 7 just closed their window for ordering the massive Snake Mountain playset, which is an amazing, amazing, amazing feat. It's probably the largest playset ever developed. Sorry, my phone just did something right there. It's probably one of the larger playsets that's ever been developed. Now, imagine, and now here's the price point for that was around $600 to $700, depending on where you ordered it from and where you get it shipped from. That's a lot of money. So I know I'm paying somewhere around $700 total to get this massive thing. Now, imagine, if you will, a line like this, more scaled down, more a readily available, cost-efficient He-Man, less, there's less paint apps, but more simplified, that harken back to the old style of action figures from the early 80s. Imagine if we were to get a Snake Mountain that cost somewhere around $80. Would you go out and buy it? So I'd like to know, again, a lot of this is just, speculation from my own mind, what could possibly happen with a figure line like this. I feel that it could be successful if there's a new series and a new, film coming out where the tooling costs are scaled down a bit, and you start developing other media to support this could work out. The problem I see is the price point. Are people willing to buy a $20 figure at the store while they can just go and get a Marvel Legends that looks way better? Now, these look great. They're really great looking figures, but when you have something that has more paint apps and more details and more articulation, more accessories at about $20, $21 at your Target or Walmart, which are these Marvel Legends, and they do have movies and they do have more media and cartoons, and they're owned by Disney now. They have a lot going up against them with that. So if they were to find a way to even further scale down these and get them at a cheaper price point and not just rely solely on the nostalgia value, they could see some moderate success with this and build up the brand more so than they ever have before. But again, I'd like to know, I'm saying, yeah, more so than they ever have before. I think 2000X was a failure because I would have liked to see that. I think the car, in the sense that they were making a lot of the mistakes that toy companies were making throughout the 90s, when you had repetitive variants of the same He-Man. And they're too stylized, so every figure had to use a different mold except the variants. So they use these variants just to scale down, or just to bring the cost down, I believe, of some of these bucks. So we saw a lot of Jungle He-Mans. We saw a lot of, we didn't see enough Ice Armor He-Mans, but we saw all sorts of different variants, and which I get it. People want to see the main characters in each wave, but sometimes you don't want to see, some He-Man that doesn't look like how He-Man is supposed to look. We saw that a lot with Batman there in the Kenner days. So let's close this out by saying that there's a lot of excitement over this. I'm probably not going to be able to get this this Comic-Con exclusive unless any of you all are going to Comic-Con and would be willing to pick one up for me. Then I'd be happy to pay. Yes, absolutely. But I'm not going to go I'm not going to go out of my way to try to find someone to get this for me, because I do believe that these may be available in the near future. And who knows, they may make an announcement at San Diego Comic-Con. Mattel may have a booth, or during PowerCon, where they're going to say, hey, you know what? We got some big plans for 2020. We got a He-Man series coming out on whatever, Netflix, and we got a movie coming out with some actor that you all hate. Which, by the way, I'd like to talk about that in the future because I do believe he may be uh, suitable for the role. But anyway, um, yeah, they may just say, "Hey, and we got this brand new toy series that's going to be available everywhere." So I anticipate that as a possibility. Uh, Otherwise, if these are just one-offs, then that'd be a big mistake on their end. It's too much to give us. It's too little to give us in a high cost, and especially if it's not going to be available to people to even just order online just for attendees. It's kind of ridiculous, but it'd be very interesting to see a whole new style. And see, Mattel has all these other properties. Well, they're losing the DC license, but imagine seeing other figures like this as well. So very interesting. I don't think they're going to bring the classics back. I'd be very curious to see what sort of Thundercat news we're going to have. But again, it's already failed once with Mattel. It keeps failing with different licenses or different companies, like Bandai, I think, had it for a while. So, anyway, folks, that's it. I want to thank everyone who actually listened to all of this, and I'd like to thank everyone who actually follows us. I'm not out actively seeking likes, but I do see that people find us somehow, whether it's through Instagram, which I tend to use a little bit more often than not. And I see a lot of people just find us on YouTube and add us. So thanks for checking this out, and feel free to comment. I like reading the comments, even if they're negative ones. They're pretty hilarious sometimes. And I got some more stuff on Show and Tell What the Hell. Like I said, I keep hinting at some super rare things and items, so I will eventually get to that. It's just a real busy time with Terranodon. A lot of events and shows happening this year, whereas last year we only did one major event. But anyway, folks, again, if you want to see some more or hear more Toy Talk stuff, let me know. If you want to know what I think about certain product lines, or what the availabilities, or Marvel Legends, I have some interesting stories to tell you, especially recent interesting stories with our modern faux collectors, as I call them, people that are barely getting into NECA and Marvel Legends, but are causing all sorts of problems. And no offense to anyone who just started doing that. There's some, you're one of the good ones. Anyway, folks, we'll see you later on.